You know, when your home gets damaged, you'd think your homeowners association would be there to help, right? Not just hand you a bill for thousands of dollars. But that's pretty much exactly what happened to one resident, and it sparked this incredible legal showdown that really puts the power of an HOA on trial. Let's break down how one leaky roof turned into a full-blown legal battle. So it all started with something super relatable, right? A homeowner, Emery Herbert, finds a persistent leak in her bedroom. But her trying to get it fixed, well, that quickly spiraled into a months-long fight that landed both her and her HOA in court. All right, so here's how we're going to walk through this story. We'll start with the homeowner versus her HOA, then dig into the battle over the leak itself. After that, we'll get into the crazy fight over the fee, what counts as maintenance versus a major upgrade, what the actual rules say, and finally, the closing arguments. What's really interesting here is that this wasn't just one complaint. It started as two separate petitions filed by Emery Herbert against her HOA. They were eventually rolled into a single, high-stakes hearing. So you've got one resident taking on the entire board of her community. And the case really boils down to two main things. First, she's accusing the HOA of failing to do its legal duty to fix her leaky roof in a timely way. And second, and this is a big one, she's saying they illegally jacked up everyone's fees to pay for a huge project without getting the required vote from the homeowners. Okay, so let's start with the leak itself. This part of the case is all about timing and responsibility. You know, when a common element like a roof starts to fail, how fast does an HOA really have to act? And you can just feel the frustration when you look at the timeline. She reports the leak in late March and is basically told to wait at least 3 months. Then, she gets promised a temporary fix, just a simple tarp, over and over again, but it never shows up. Over 100 days go by with nothing happening except emails and empty promises. So, the homeowner's argument really hangs on this specific Arizona law. She's claiming the HOA is liable for the prompt repair of the damage to the roof. And, waiting over 3 months while water is still coming in, that's anything but prompt. But the HOA, they had a completely different story. Their lawyer argued, look, this isn't about one small leak. This is about a much bigger problem. The community's roofs were 4 decades old, and according to the experts, they were just beyond patching at this point. So the HOA's defense was basically, hey, we are acting, but we're doing it the right way for everyone. They said, look, there are multiple units leaking, so the only real solution is to replace all the roofs in the entire community. They also tried to argue that the prompt repair part of the law that she cited, well, that it only applies to damage caused while accessing a unit for other work, which wasn't the case here. Okay, so let's shift gears to the second fight. And this is where things get, well, really expensive. To pay for this massive roof replacement, the HOA didn't ask for a vote. Nope. They just changed the monthly dues. Now, just for some context, homeowners in this community were used to paying a super modest monthly fee of just $33. Then, a letter goes out, and for the next 7 months, that fee was jumping to $885. That is not a typo. That's an increase of more than 2,500%. So, why the astronomical hike? Well, the total cost to replace all the roofs in the community was over $350,000. And the board just decided to collect that money directly from homeowners through their monthly dues. Now, whether the HOA was even allowed to do this all comes down to a really critical legal distinction. Was this project maintenance or was it a capital improvement? Because the answer to that question changes everything. The HOA argued this was just simple maintenance. They were just, keeping the property in good shape by replacing a part that was failing. Just a necessary expense to keep things working. But the homeowner, backed up by an accountant, argued this was a classic capital improvement. Ripping off and replacing a 40-year-old roof isn't just upkeep. It's a major renovation that makes the property last longer and increases its value. And look, this isn't just arguing over words. The difference here is huge. If it's maintenance, the board can pretty much just raise the dues to cover it. But if it's a capital improvement that costs more than $2,500, their own rules say they have to get a 75% vote from homeowners. And then this came out. This is a quote pulled directly from the HOA's own meeting minutes. A board member admits they're doing the financing this way, partly because of frustration over owners not voting. The homeowner argued this was a total smoking gun, that it proved the board was trying to get around a vote they were afraid they would lose. So, when you've got two sides this far apart, you have to go to the rulebook, the CC&Rs. And, as you might guess, both sides had a very different way of reading the fine print. This table really breaks down the back and forth. The homeowner points to Section 9, which says any improvement over $2,500 needs that 75% vote. The HOA says, no, that doesn't count for necessary maintenance, and points to Section 13, which gives them broad power. Then the homeowner brings up an amendment that caps dues increases at 5% a year, but the HOA says that rule only applies to fees they pay to a bigger master association. It's a real mess.
So after all the evidence and testimony, it all came down to the closing arguments, where each side got one last chance to make their case to the judge.
The homeowner's final argument was pretty straightforward. The HOA broke the law by not making a prompt repair, and she argued that the leak was caused by years of neglecting the roof drains. The roof project is a capital improvement by pretty much any standard definition, and this huge fee increase was an illegal end run around the vote required by their own rules.
The HOA fired back, saying they are fulfilling their duty to repair, maintain, and replace by taking on the only responsible fix for 40-year-old roofs. They stuck to their guns, saying this is necessary maintenance, not a capital improvement, and that their own documents give them the authority to raise the money to protect the community's assets.
And this whole case leaves us with a really fascinating question, one that applies to just about any shared community. When does just fixing a problem become a fundamental overhaul of the property? And more importantly, who gets to make that decision? Is it a small elected board, or is it the entire community of owners who ultimately have to foot the bill?